Welcome to Massanutten Regional Library's online story time. I'm Mr. Randy. This will be the second part of our hats story time. We're going to begin with our 5 hats rhyme that we used last time. Can you show me one finger to begin our rhyme? One little kid on a sunny day put on her hat and went out to play. 2 little kids heard the singing of a lark, put on their hats and went to the park. 3 little kids, when the sky was blue, put on their hats and went to the zoo. 4 little kids by the kitchen door put on their hats and went to the store. 5 little kids on a sunny day nodded their heads and went out to play. Our first story today in our second hats story time is actually called Caps for Sale. A cap is a type of hat. I'm going to wear my cap, my hat. Caps for Sale. A tale of a peddler, some monkeys, and their monkey business, told and illustrated by Esfir Slobokina. Once there was a peddler who sold caps. Look at all his caps. But he was not like an ordinary peddler carrying his wares on his back. He carried them on top of his head. First he had on his own checked cap, then a bunch of gray caps, then a bunch of brown caps and a bunch of blue caps, and on the very top, a bunch of red caps. He walked up and down the streets, holding himself very straight, so as not to upset his caps. As he went along, he called, "Caps, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap." One morning, he couldn't sell any caps. He walked up the street and he walked down the street calling, "Caps, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap." But nobody wanted any caps that morning. Nobody wanted even a red cap. He began to feel very hungry, but he had no money for lunch. "I think I'll go for a walk in the country," said he, and he walked out of town slowly, slowly, so as not to upset his caps. He walked for a long time until he came to a great big tree. "That's a nice place for a rest," he thought. And he sat down very slowly under the tree and leaned back little by little against the tree trunk so as not to disturb the caps on his head. Then he put up his hand to feel if they were straight. First his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. They were all there, so he went to sleep. And he slept for a long time. When he woke up, he was refreshed and rested. But before standing up, he felt with his hand to make sure his caps were in the right place, and all he felt was his own checked cap. He looked to the right of him, no caps. He looked to the left of him, no caps. He looked in the back of him, no caps. He looked behind the tree, no caps. Then he looked up into the tree, and what do you think he saw? On every branch sat a monkey. On every monkey was a gray or a brown or a blue or a red cap. The peddler looked at the monkeys, and the monkeys looked at the peddler. He didn't know what to do. Finally, he spoke to them. "You monkeys, you," he said, shaking a finger at them, "you give me back my caps." But the monkeys only shook their fingers back at him and said, "Tis, tis, 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 tis." This made the peddler angry, so he shook both hands at them and said, "You monkeys, you, give me back my caps." But the monkeys, they only shook their hands back at him and said, "Tis, tis, 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 tis." Now he felt quite angry. He stamped his foot and he said, "You monkeys, you better give me back my caps." But the monkeys only stamped their feet back at him and said, "Tis, tis, 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 tis." Oh, he's so frustrated. By this time, the peddler was really very angry. He stamped both his feet and shouted, "You monkeys, you must give me back my caps." But the monkeys only stamped both their feet back at him and said, "Tis, tis, 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 tis." At last, he became so angry that he pulled off his own cap and he threw it on the ground and began to walk away. But then each monkey pulled off his cap, and all the gray caps and all the brown caps and all the blue caps and all the red caps came flying down out of the tree. So the peddler picked up his caps, put them back on his head, first his own check cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. And slowly, slowly, he walked back to town calling, "Caps, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap." The end. That is the story of Caps for Sale. The next story I would like us to share is Whose Hat Is This? A look at hats workers wear, hard, tall, and shiny by Sharon Katz Cooper. Put on your thinking caps and guess whose hat is whose. There are hard hats and soft hats, square hats and round hats. There are even very tall hats. Some workers wear hats to keep them warm. Others wear hats to stay clean. A hat can block sun from a worker's eyes. A hat can protect a head from getting hurt. Hats come in all sizes and shapes. Can you guess whose hat is whose? Whose hat is this, so bright and shiny? Bright and shiny. It's also red and yellow. This is a firefighter's helmet. She runs into burning buildings to put out fires. Her helmet keeps her head safe from falling objects and extreme heat. Whose hat is this, hanging over a face? This is a beekeeper's hat. A beekeeper raises bees for honey. She reaches into hives with buzzing bees to get the honey. Her hat covers her face and protects her from stings. Whose hat is this, so tall and clean? This is a chef's hat. His hat is also called a taqueria. His white hat shows that his kitchen is clean. The chef in charge of a restaurant wears the tallest hat. Whose hat is this with a polished silver badge? This is a police officer's cap. It is part of her uniform. A police officer's cap helps people find her quickly in a crowd because no one else will be wearing the same cap. Whose hat is this, so round and strong? This is a football player's helmet. When one football player tackles another one, his helmet keeps his head safe if he hits the ground or another player. Whose hat is this, shining in the night? This is an astronaut's helmet. It is part of his spacesuit. Up in space, there is no air. His helmet gives him air to breathe and keeps his body at a steady temperature. Whose hat is this, so hard and yellow? This is a construction worker's hard hat. Sometimes workers drop pieces of wood or sharp nails while they are working. A construction worker wears a hard hat to protect his head. Whose hat is this, so warm and snug? This is your hat. When it is cold outside, it keeps your head warm. When it snows, it keeps your head dry. The end. Whose hat is this? And the last story that we're going to read today is Do You Have a Hat? By Eileen Spinelli. Do you have a hat, something fuzzy, warm, and red to keep the snowflakes off your head? Or maybe floppy brimmed and blue when summer shines down on you? Do you have a hat? Francisco de Goya had a hat with candles on the brim, a clever hat that suited him, that made a chandelier of light for painting far into the night. Do you have a hat? Igor Stravinsky had a hat, a tattered, battered green beret. He wore it every single day. They say it never left his head, not even when he went to bed. Do you have a hat? Carmen Miranda had a hat, a towering hat of plums and cherries, peaches, oranges, and berries, plump bananas by the bunch, a hat her friends could eat for lunch. Do you have a hat? Abraham Lincoln had a hat, a stovepipe hat, black and tall, a presidential carryall. Abe Lincoln wore it round the town with documents inside the crown. Do you have a hat? Nat Love had a hat, a cowboy hat to wear, of course, or carry water to his horse, or to give a pesky fly a slap, or play the pillow for his nap. Do you have a hat? Isabel of Bavaria had a hat, a cone-shaped hat so very high, it poked a gargoyle in the eye. The doorways had to be redone so she could fit through every one. Do you have a hat? Walt Whitman had a hat, a rather old and shabby hat, at times a makeshift table mat for writing poems in the sun or eating supper on the run. Do you have a hat? Louis Clement had a hat to close his magic act, a normal-looking hat, in fact, but reaching in as was his habit, Louis produced a bunny rabbit. Do you have a hat? John Chapman had a hat. They say he wore a cooking pot. Some folks believe that, some do not. If true, he was a sight indeed, a pop-tot hat, sower of apple seed. Do you have a hat? Amelia Earhart had a hat, so did Daniel Boone, it's true. Charlie Chaplin, Sally Ride, all of them had hats. Do you? Do you have a hat? A fancy hat, a hat that's plain, a hat for walking in the rain, a hat with feathers, flowers, bows, a hat that hoots, a hat that glows, a magic hat, a cap, a crown, a country hat, a hat for town. A single hat, squash flat or tall, is better than no hat at all. Do you have a hat? Well, thank you for joining us for Massanutten Regional Library's online story time. We'll see you next time.